Hi, friends. I'm very happy that I didn't take the time to talk about this specific issue earlier because if I had, it would have ended on a sour note. We are living in a moment of history. However temporal it may be, I think this is something um, genuinely that we should be celebrating. 6 days ago, the Trump administration asked the Supreme Court if it would be possible to restrict LGBTQ adoption. Trump, the most LGBT friendly president ever. Has anyone seen that tweet by Shu? It was a very funny tweet. Can we bring that up? Shu tweets a lot. Let's see if we can. Yeah, here we go. Here's Shu on head in 2016. Gay friends, please hold your tears till shit actually goes down. I highly doubt Trump will undo gay rights or anything like that. So, the Trump administration asked the Supreme Court if it would be possible to restrict LGBTQ adoption. And the Supreme Court said, and this is very important, I'll get back to you on that. Hold that thought, Donald Trump. We'll get right back to you on that issue. 2 days ago, Donald Trump went ahead and his administration rolled back transgender health protections. For evidently no reason. Well, we know the reason, but for no good reason. Medical protections for transgender people in America have been rolled back. Now, the specifics of this are fairly complicated, and I don't want to go over the meanderings of it, because if you want to, you can probably find some medical journal somewhere that details the changes more accurately than I ever could, but the essence of this was simple. An unprompted and unprovoked attack on the civil rights of Americans for absolutely no good reason, but I do have an explanation for this. Right now, Donald Trump's chances of winning the election are negligible. Not only is Joe Biden winning comfortably in national polling, he is comfortably ahead in almost all of the swing states polling. Even Texas has a decent chance of going to Biden. Texas. An extraordinary turnaround, and in large part motivated by Donald Trump's inability to respond effectively not only to COVID-19, but to the Black Lives Matter movement, which has, of course, become something of a contentious topic of discussion amongst Americans over the past couple of weeks. Right now, American approval for the BLM protests is near 80%. I'm sorry, near 75. It's about 74%, I think, the last time I saw it. 75, near 75, near 3/4, not 80, near 3/4. That is enormous. That is unbelievable. And a huge shoot up in that has taken place over just the past week. And in large part, that is because we have video recordings of police acting in unfathomably aggressive ways towards the protesters they are meant to be responding to, because American police have never even heard the term de-escalation, and because Donald Trump has not only enabled the militarization of the police, has not only actively called for the shooting of looters, but has specifically targeted certain protesters, especially that old man who got knocked down, and engaged in conspiracism as to whether or not those particular people, these victims of police brutality, these people now knocked into comas, at least with regards to that old man, are Antifa. Unbelievable. Legitimately unbelievable, that idea that the United States president would engage in conspiracism against people who are victims of unprompted police violence. And you know what? Right now, things aren't looking that good for Trump, electorally speaking. So what better action to take than to fall back on the far right? I mean, hey, if you're losing support amongst the more moderate wing of the Republican Party, the best you can do is try to consolidate your fan base by engaging in, the limitation of or restriction of civil rights of minority groups. I mean, that makes sense. Like, that's what you do. You double down in situations like that. Now, of course, we conclude the shoe on head tweet. It's cute, you see. I thought it was funny. I appreciated it. I was amused. A lot of people said a lot of dumb stuff back in 2016. But you know, not everyone is that upset about the Trump administration's decision to roll back in protections for transgender individuals in our medical care system. A wonderful, a barking seal of a woman, what's her name? Blair White, has written an article on the impartial news outlet, The Post Millennial, on how trans healthcare isn't being rolled back, actually. You can read this if you want. It's just lying. So if you would like to. But it really is. Have we all heard the term pick me? Girl, a pick me girl? Ooh, me, I'm different. We know that term, right? The pick me girl? We know that term? I'm not like the other transes. An unprecedented and indefensible attack on the civil rights of transgender people. But Blair White has to be the good one. She runs over there. Oh, I hope Blair White got some very affirming text messages and Twitter DMs from her favorite masculine heterosexual cis men. I really do. I genuinely hope so. I do sincerely hope that there are good dividends on selling yourself out. Because man, you know, for a swerf, I have to say what Blair White is doing right now is way the fuck more degrading than any sex work. By I would say an exponential factor. So Godspeed to Blair. Again, you can read the article if you would really like to. It's not very impressive. Writing is not one of Blair White's strong suits. If anyone can find a strong suit of hers besides, you know, what she does, then you can let me know. That would have been the story if I had 2 days ago talked about this. If 2 days ago I had said, well, here's the update. Civil rights are being rolled back, and that's it. Congratulations, Hell World. That would have been how this ended. But remember how I began this story? Remember how I began? When the Trump administration so boldly walked up to the Supreme Court and said, can we keep the gays from adopting? I want to say, by the way, really quickly, and I know this isn't really, like, essential to the story, but it is important to know how unbelievably inept the Trump administration is. You don't just go up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court doesn't write laws. That's not what the Supreme Court does. They interpret the Constitution. They make decisions based on court cases that are brought to them. For the Trump administration to go up to the court, I'm trying to think how that would play. I'm trying to think like how that would play out. Like what is an analogy for how stupid that is? The Trump administration, the executive branch of the government, their responsibility is the execution of law. Now, they can suggest laws and they can push policy, they can write executive orders, they can do a lot. But the Supreme Court can't just up and create new law or add exemptions to existing law for no reason. There has to be like a court case brought to it. So for the Trump administration to go ahead and just ask them, it's not only is it pathetically permissive, but it also suggests to me that they genuinely do not know what the legal limitations of their actions are. The Trump administration has always been hilariously inefficacious in the ways it tries to achieve its policy goals, so this is nothing new. They couldn't repeal Obamacare. Where's the wall at? Can you tell me? Anyone gone to the border recently? Did Mexico pay for it? He's never been particularly good at following through on any of his policy promises, but I think this genuinely does hit a new low. But the story doesn't end there. Yeah, we got 100 kilometers of fence somewhere. There's somewhere we listen. Hey, Mexico didn't pay for shit. However, there is a span of chicken wire running across the southern border from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to midway across the Louisiana border. Okay, we're doing it, baby. We're doing it. We're straight across. Hey, listen, the illegals, okay, when they run across the border, they might trip over it. They might. Chicken wire can be pretty sharp if you fall into it. You know, hey, listen, it's better than nothing. Just this morning, in a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court agreed that it is unconstitutional for employers to discriminate against people based on their gender identity or their sexuality. And that's it. And that's it right there. Based Gorsuch, and I'm surprised this ended up being a 6-3 decision. Should be no surprise Kavanaugh dissented. In a 6-3 decision, that's how the Supreme Court responded. The Trump administration came up. They were like, "Can we do something about the gays?" Supreme Court said, "Yeah, just give us a week." And there we go. Sorry, Kavanaugh was not able to run back to Daddy Trump with a favorable ruling, but oh man. Ben Shapiro was mauling on Twitter. In case you were wondering, here let's read his salty tears. Libertarian conservative Ben Shapiro, by the way, or actually, it would be fitting for a libertarian conservative to be triggered as fuck by human rights being upheld or like anti-employment discrimination law. This Gorsuch decision is not originalist in any way. He acknowledges as much. It is simply a bad outcome-driven legal decision. And it throws religious liberty, free speech, and employment law into complete turmoil. You hear that, folks? Free speech is dead because you can't discriminate against gay and trans people in the workplace anymore. Damn. Gonna miss that free speech. Bastiat, wonderful. You're a lawyer. You can listen to me embarrass myself as I try to explain the reason why this was unconstitutional to begin with. Listen up, people. It is the role and responsibility of the Supreme Court of the United States to have court cases brought before them and verify the constitutionality of certain laws. Sometimes the Supreme Court will just look at a law and say, "No, that's cringe, stop." Sometimes it'll just be like, "Hey, stop." But sometimes the argument has to be made. And the argument that was made was this. In the Civil Rights Act, which was passed in, if I remember correctly, 1964, but please do not quote me, they have a number of titles being the laws pertaining to that act, all divvied up. And thank you, Bastia. And we have a title called Title VII, which forbids private employers to discriminate against their employees, among other things. I'm simplifying a little bit here, based on a number of characteristics, including race, nationality, sex, and a few other things. Since then, there have been additions to the provision in Title VII, including no longer discriminating against people based on their pregnancy status, and I think whether or not they've been divorced. There have been additions, okay? I'm not a lawyer, okay? But here's the fundamental argument that is being made. The question is this: does the language of Title VII in its current state lend itself to the protection of gay and transgender people from discrimination by their employers? And there is a reason why the answer is yes. And the reason is as follows. If you discriminate against a person for being gay, let's say a gay man, okay? So, man who likes men. What are you discriminating against? Well, ostensibly, you're discriminating against their sexual identity, which is not in and of itself sex. Those are two separate things. But what is sexual identity? Well, in the case of that particular guy, the failing seems to be that he likes a man while being a man. In essence, the only reason why you can discriminate against somebody being gay is because they are the quote-unquote wrong sex to be liking the type of person that they like. Intrinsically, sex, as we understand it in a constitutional sense, is inextricably linked to the criteria by which we recognize sexual attraction. And for that reason, to discriminate against sexual attraction is to discriminate against sex. After all, if you have two people, a woman and a man, both of whom like men, and you discriminate only against one of them, you're discriminating against that person for liking man while being a man. The discrimination is against the sex. And likewise, with regards to transgender people, the only reason why transgender people are discriminated against, the only reason they're transgender, in large part, again, we're using constitutional law here, not super woke like constructivist gender theory, is because the way in which they identify does not gel with our social expectation as to what sex a person should be in order to have such an identity. In essence, if you have a transgender woman who identifies as a woman but was assigned male at birth, the discrimination against her is inextricably linked to the disconnect in the bigot's mind between their identity and the sex they were born, i.e., discrimination against transgender people is also inextricably linked to discrimination against sex. And that is, and has been, for the past 55 years, a valid argument in favor of the inclusion of sexual attraction and gender identity with regards to the language of the Title VII, provision within the Civil Rights Act. And that was what I thought when I first read out the case, when I read it out, when I looked over Title VII again. Because, it can't just be right. The Supreme Court's job isn't to do the right thing. It's to do the constitutional thing. And in this case, they did. I would like to read a segment from Gorsuch's affirming rule, where he writes his opinion on the matter. But none of this helps decide today's cases. Ours is a society of written laws. Judges are not free to overlook plain, statutory commands on the strength of nothing more than suppositions about intentions or guesswork about expectations. In Title VII, Congress adopted broad language making it illegal for an employer to rely on an employee's sex when deciding to fire that employee. We do not hesitate to recognize today a necessary consequence of that legislative choice. An employer who fires an individual merely for being gay or transgender defies the law. The judgments of the Second and Sixth Circuits in numbers 17 to 1623 and 18107 are affirmed. The judgment of the 11th Circuit in numbers 17 to 1618 is reversed, and the case is remanded for further proceedings consistent with this opinion. Now, not everyone's happy about this. Because we have had a dissenting opinion ruled. Who wrote it? Kavanaugh? Who filed it? Yep, Kavanaugh filed a dissenting opinion. How long was it? Hold on. Let me see. What was the length? Hold on. 142 pages? Is that it? 142 pages. Thank you, chat, for finding the link. No, is that Justice Alito? Oh, no, Justice Alito has made their own dissent. Kavanaugh has had a separate dissent. Kavanaugh has actually dissented for a separate reason. We actually have two separate armies of Mulders right now. 142 pages. 142 pages. Now, I am not a lawyer, a judge, a legal expert, or in fact, literate, but I do know one thing. Who here is familiar with the honorable and now thankfully deceased Judge Scalia? Who here is familiar with this man? Does anyone remember? The man, the myth, the legend. We all know? Scalia, sorry. Scalia. Now, wait, are there seriously people who don't know who this was? He died like 3 years ago. Okay, wow, I'm okay. I was a kid 3 years ago? He was a long-standing conservative Supreme Court justice who sat on the court for, I think, maybe 400 or 500 years. And if you go back and you look at some of his dissenting opinions, this guy was on the wrong side of every single issue. Now, again, I can't verify the constitutionality of all the arguments that he made, but this motherfucker was on basically the wrong side of every single social issue imaginable. He was unfathomably influential. But I looked at some of his court cases, and frankly, I press F to doubt, my friends. I pressed F to doubt. A lot of those cases really seemed like his rulings were being motivated by personal bias rather than an objective reading of the Constitution. Now, for me to actually read on this extensively, this would be like a whole other video, and I'd have to do a lot of research. But from what I've seen of some of this guy's like rulings, some of these seem virtually indefensible to me. And the reason why I bring this up is because they mad, folks. Because they mad as shit. Because that motherfucking 142-page dissent is motivated by malding. It's not motivated by a rational and objective interpretation of the Constitution. They're malding. They're so fucking mad. They're seething right now. And I think that's what a lot of them do. To a lot of conservatives, the Constitution really genuinely is just a vehicle through which they can push their political opinions. See all the conservatives who complain about their free speech being violated any single time anything happens anywhere to anyone. But then they don't mind Trump cracking down on libel laws, threatening to remove the citizenship of people who burn flags, threatening to deport citizens, and calling an undefined group of protesters a terrorist group. They don't seem to mind that very much, you see. I really do think that the constitutionality of issues is very often ignored by conservatives, the Patriot Act as well, in favor of a highly partisan reading of the available text. And as somebody who is not entirely a fan of the Constitution and of the Supreme Court generally, I will say this. For the most part, the Constitution is on our side. For the most part, the language of the Constitution is a tool that we can use to meaningfully better the lives of the citizenry, to meaningfully interpret in ways which favor things like freedom and civil rights, dignity and freedom, in large part from the government. So I encourage everyone who is heartened by this decision that the Supreme Court has confirmed Title VII protections of the 1964 Civil Rights Act does indeed protect employees who are discriminated against by their gender, identity, or sexuality. I encourage you to take a further look at the Supreme Court, a further look at the constitutionality of what's going on today under Donald Trump, and to remember that this is yet another a tool, yet another vehicle through which we can make progress. And that's it. So happy I held off on doing this story for 2 days because that's a much happier ending. We haven't fixed the fact that the Trump administration has rolled back medical rights for transgender and gay individuals, but you know what? That's why we're riding with Biden, baby. They'll probably fix that pretty soon once he's in office. We'll see how it goes.